Richard Stallman is not paying your bills.
All right, well, here we go. Today is Sunday, June 19th, 2016, and this is episode 163 of the Defensive Security Podcast. My name is Jerry Bell, and joining me tonight, as always, is Mr. Andrew Callett.
Hi, Jerry. How are you, sir?
I'm doing awesome. How are you?
I'm doing well. Sorry we missed each other last week.
Yep, no worries.
It was pretty tragic to have that toddler break into the llama pen and attack our llamas like that.
Yeah, that was not good.
I mean,
but we have new llamas now, so
that's true. And our lawyers have asked we say nothing further on that topic until the litigation is resolved.
Oh dear. So yes, sorry for last week, and hopefully we will be back on track again. Just before we get into our stories, a reminder that the thoughts and opinions we express on the show are ours and do not represent those of those of our employers. So getting into our stories, I actually came prepared with sound effects for this one. Here you go.
Wow.
There we go.
Wow, so, I'm hiding under my desk.
Yeah, well, you should, because this first story is super duper bad. Actually, in the story, it says this vulnerability has a massive security impact, probably the widest impact in the history of Windows.
Wait, let me ask you for some key questions.
Okay.
First.
Yes.
Does it have a name?
It does. It has the name Bad Tunnel.
Does it have a logo?
Not that I've seen.
Oh, well, how bad can it be?
I don't know. It doesn't have a song either.
Well,
There's no celebrity spokesperson. There's no song.
Is there a concert to, raise money for the victims even?
Anyway, so this story is from darkreading.com, and the title is Windows Bad Tunnel Attack Hijacks Network Traffic. This is a kind of a potentially bad bug. I feel pretty confident that we've seen plenty of worse Windows bugs in the past.
Yeah, like Vista.
I was gonna go ME, but okay.
Sorry.
Anyway. This story here, the vulnerability here, was detected by Yang Yu, who is an employee of a security research company called Tencent, who I had not heard of before in China. And apparently this particular problem manifests itself because it's taking advantage, as far as I can tell, of normal functionality kind of strung together in bad ways. So
yeah, this is almost reminding me of like UPnP on steroids.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of convenience being
right.
Kind of subjugated to badness sort of thing. It's Windows trying to be helpful and people going, "Oh, look, you're dumb."
Right. Yeah. So, basically an attacker running a malicious website, either by tricking you to visit the site or with some kind of a malicious document, maybe you might say a malicious link, can in fact, I'm going to get some tweets about that one.
You think you will?
Well,
you're so vain. You think this joke's about you?
It usually is.
Okay.
So anyway, you as an attacker convince someone to connect to a web server that you are running, which is listening on UDP 137. The victim will try to reach out, and you are effectively, as the attacker, trying to force feed some NetBIOS information back, which effectively at that point allows you to use a WPAD, which we're all, maybe lots of us are pretty familiar with. That's the Windows proxy, transparent proxy configuration. I don't remember
Yeah,
what the
it's
acronym
Windows
is.
Proxy Auto Discovery.
There you go.
Yep.
And anyway, it would allow you effectively to alter the traffic of the victim, the the network flow of the victim, and you basically put yourself in line. So not a great thing. Again, I don't think it's maybe worthy of a air raid siren, but whatever.
And yet it was.
Yeah, yeah. And then wait, I gotta do it because that's right. Adobe Flash.
Oh man, you should just leave the air raid siren on all the time then if we're going to talk about Adobe Flash.
So yes, Flash Player has yet another significant exploit or vulnerability that is being exploited. It was, in fact, being exploited before the patch came out.
This is not a repeat of last month, the month before, the month before that, the month before that, and the month before that, mind you. This is...
Yeah. Oh, I do want to say back on that last thing, that last story.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of made me reminded me of it. You really do want to control your egress.
Oh yeah.
Right. And so if you in the context of that last story, if you are, if you're blocking, it's not entirely clear to me, but I believe if you're blocking port 137 outbound, I think it really mitigates that particular attack. And in the case of this, I really think most organizations should be blocking Flash.
Yeah, I read it as a malicious insider, or if somebody's got a foothold, they could launch this sort of man-in-the-middle type attack inside your organization if they're already inside.
Yep, that's true.
That's how I read it. But
well, but that's if you're inside, WPAD gives you all sorts of other opportunities.
Look, man, security firms got to publish papers.
Well, that's true.
How else are they relevant?
Well, in fact, that report was pimping a Black Hat talk, I believe.
Oh,
yeah.
Shocking. So you said this guy was a security researcher in China, right?
Yep.
Not the one recently arrested for stealing IBM secrets, is he?
I don't think so.
Okay. Different Chinese security researcher.
Well, I'm assuming there's quite a few Chinese people.
More than one. Yeah, you're probably right. I just was trying to be clever. I failed.
It didn't work.
No. Anyway, back to Flash.
Back to Flash, yes. So not a whole lot to say here because, again, it's super bad. Patch or better yet, remove it and block it.
Yeah, I've started tweeting never Flash hashtag whenever I can. It is interesting. I do think Flash is still continuing to slowly die. Chrome is now going to ship without it active, I think, in the next rev or two. We're getting there, slowly but surely. The problem, just sort of to throw us out there, is everyone's like, replace it with HTML5. Well, yes. However, there's no guarantee that we're not going to have similar security challenges with the similar functionality built into HTML5 with the way it currently looks today. So to be determined if that's really going to be a better option or not. The other thing is there's still a lot of applications out there, especially in the enterprise, that are dependent upon Flash.
The irony is both that and Flash and Java, a lot of them are security tools.
Yeah, absolutely. So, at my current gig, our CISO's like, just uninstall Flash. We're like, we can't. Like 18 of our security tools use it. He's like, gosh, darn it. and other things in the organization that are important use it. And they have to be basically rewritten to not use Flash to get rid of it. But you can do things. You can turn on, click to activate, and there are other things you can do configure so that it's not as susceptible to a drive-by download or other random stuff that may not happen. Of course, most users may just get click happy or, activation fatigue and just turn it on whenever they see that anyway.
I want to see my cat videos.
Absolutely. So yeah, Flash is.
Yep.
You would think by now, they would. I thought they built in a whole new architecture to Flash recently too, that sort of sandboxed and stopped a bunch of types of attacks. But no, this one had 36 security holes.
They did, and for a while there, it was I think we went almost a year, if memory serves, without any significant problems. And then I think basically what happened was people kind of found where the barn door was on the new protections they built, and everybody's running through it.
And on this one, we saw active exploits of a 0-day.
Yes,
So they were limited but targeted, as far as we know.
they usually are. Yeah,
But that's a pretty big deal. If you see active exploitation of a 0-day, that's you
right.
know. And the other thing that I think a challenge for some enterprises is they want to test patches in a test group before they deploy widespread. The challenge there is that these issues happen so rapidly that you incur a lot of risk if you slow down patching on something like Flash or Java.
That's right.
And I get that it breaks stuff, but there's a risk either way. You either take the risk of getting popped or you take the risk of breaking stuff and rolling back. Personally, I'd rather shotgun this stuff out to my user population as quickly as I can and deal with the broken applications as a one-off help desk issue. But I'm a security guy, so that's how I look at things.
Yeah, there's the problem is there's a spectrum of broken, right? Because we've seen in the past, like some of the Microsoft patches have actually broken the endpoint. And
Yeah, to be fair, Microsoft patches is a different story. I'm just talking Flash and Java.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah, Microsoft patches you probably do need to test. In fact, during Patch Tuesday this month, there was something that broke a bunch of GPO stuff
Yes.
that people are still figuring out. Yeah, I wouldn't just shotgun Microsoft patches out there into the world. I would test those first. That's for sure. But for Java and Flash, I would encourage organizations to move to a much faster, more aggressive upgrade cycle on those if they can.
Indeed. So that story, in fact, came from Brian Krebs, and the next one comes from Brian Krebs too, and this one is titled "Banks Credit Card Breach at CiCi's Pizza." So for those who are not aware, CiCi's Pizza is I'll say it, inexpensive pizza buffet place here in the U.S.
We're using the term pizza loosely,
Pizza-like substance,
but it's all you can eat for like what, $6?
something like that.
It's not terrible.
Yeah.
It's,
Anyhow,
hell, we grew up on White Castle. Come on, who are we to judge?
touche. All right, so this is like the well-worn story here. Apparently, common point of purchase credit card fraud points back to a breach at CiCi's Pizza.
There is one little interesting caveat, which is it looks like the initial infiltration point was people posing as technical support specialists.
Yeah, and potentially also involving TeamViewer.
Yeah, that's a little unclear, but it wasn't necessarily a Target or a Home Depot where they broke in and got to the centralized management repository for the POSs and pushed malware out. They looks like they did more of a social engineering attack in this case. But I know that's not the point of the story, but just
yeah. So CiCi's Pizza basically said, hey, we outsourced that whole stuff, that whole business to a third party called Champion Management, and apparently Champion didn't get back to Brian Krebs, but Brian in fact found that there's another company called DataPoint who is apparently the credit card processor for CiCi's Pizza.
No, they're the point of sale vendor.
Thank you. Point of sale vendor.
Big difference. Sorry.
Yep. Thank you for correcting me there. Yep. And anyway, so in doing research, Brian found that apparently Google gives you a warning when you search for them on Google. It warns you that their site may be hacked.
So the datapoint.com, the point of sale vendor,
datapointpos.com.
Their website.
Yeah.
At one point was considered serving malware by Google. That's awesome.
Yeah. Now so I'll say Brian kind of crossed swords a little bit with a spokesperson from this DataPoint company, saying that spokesperson basically said, the Secret Service came out here, looked at us, did some scans. I don't know what that means. Said that there was, I guess, no problem, and that this the attacks have apparently been traced to, quote, social engineering / TeamViewer breaches because stores from several POS vendors let supposed techs into conduct support. Nothing to do with any of our, meaning DataPoint, support mechanisms, which are highly restricted and well within PCI compliance. So that's all interesting, but the story does not get entertaining until you read the comments.
Now, typically we tell people never read the comments.
I'm going to tell you, read the comments.
But in general, read the comments on Brian Krebs' site, and specifically for this story.
Yeah.
Carry on.
So apparently, it's not entirely clear to me what positions these people hold, but there are a number of people who are desperately trying to repair the brand image of DataPoint in the comments section, and not doing a very good job, I'll say. It's an entertaining read. I won't do it justice. You really need to read it yourself. It's well worth it.
But yeah, it is how not to do PR.
Yeah, and by the way, that is a very good point. It was one thing I had neglected to bring up, that this is a great example of what not to do. I mean, these guys, even if they're right, by the way, and I'm not saying, I really don't know what the facts of the case are here, but even if they're right, they're not looking very good here. They're basically trying to deflect, basically saying, "Oh, that website that Brian found, that was just like a placeholder, not important." And everybody, all the respondents are saying, "Oh, this is a reflection of you." And anyway,
it's funny too when they start getting into it. Couple things to note here. Brian is a journalist, and I have nothing but respect for Brian. So when you start going after him in his comments, and you're a representative of the company, that is gold for him. He wants you to do that because he happily engages with you and starts just very professionally, but just laying down the facts. Countering this guy who supposedly somehow works, and the way it plays out here, it sounds like Brian knows who this guy is too. So there's almost some validation that whoever this guy is talking for, DataPoint is legit because of the way Brian responds back to him. Seems like he knows who he is. I could be overly reading into that, but it's funny too because there's still websites, like web portions of the DataPoint POS website, things like datapointpos.com/buying Viagra with no prescription. Oops.
Yeah.
Yep. So this Todd guy, the Todd, he's logged under Todd, apparently is somebody representing DataPoint.
Yeah, and if you read through there, it's pretty clear there's 3 or 4 different people who are clearly representatives or somehow associated with the company. But anyway, it's just it's a great example of what not to do. I mean, you do a lot better off just going in there and saying, you know what, glad you pointed that out. We're gonna get it taken care of.
Or have a very well thought out, crafted, vetted message that you send to Brian for him to publish or whatever.
Yeah,
don't do it off the cuff.
Trying to pick at his story is just not going to go well for you.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on, our next story comes from the IEEE security.org site, and this one is it's an academic report from some people at the University of Michigan. And actually, one of our listeners asked us to talk about it last week, and since we didn't have a show, we're talking about it this week. And the title is A2 Analog Malicious Hardware, and it's a probably it was way over my head at parts, but
it's 20 pages of an academic paper. It's
it's
non-trivial,
right? And if I'll net it out, right? So. The idea here is that the researchers were trying to find a way to implement at a circuit level a backdoor in a microprocessor, and effectively, they came up with a pretty clever design that gets around some of the weaknesses of other backdoor strategies. So there's been two common avenues where either the company that's making the chip makes an alteration to the design before they actually print it, and that can often be found through X-ray analysis or some other forensic techniques. And then the other way is what's called dopant trojaning. And basically that is where they are, the layout of the circuit looks correct. However, they apply too much doping compound to, particular areas or particular transistors, and that forces them to stay on, and you really can't see it with something like an X-ray. But basically in active use, that particular transistor doesn't turn on or off. It's always on or always off, and so that that in turn creates the backdoor. This particular technique, actually, what it does is it's pretty clever. It creates a capacitance, so they kind of reroute lines, I guess, together in a way that doesn't look out of the ordinary, and they effectively create a capacitor between one line, which might control something like the privilege execution of the processor, and then something that doesn't fire very often in normal conditions. And so what they this particular tech relies on is rapid triggering of a line that normally doesn't trigger quickly, and that causes voltage to build up across the capacitor to that other line, which will fire a high. So now the attackers, knowing this, can effectively send some kind of a workload through the processor, knowing that after a certain amount of state flips, the other line will go high, and obviously it's really dependent on the implementation of what that can result in. But typically that would allow them something like to elevate the privilege of a process. So it's pretty clever. You wouldn't really be able to tell this with the two common testing techniques, which are physical analysis in X-rays, or they also have a kind of a bench setup where they effectively fuzz the processor with information or with different states to make sure that it does what it's expected to do, and apparently this is very difficult to detect. So I don't know if possibly knowing that this exists, maybe somebody will come up with a new way to detect it, but it's pretty clever and kind of points out that the world is a scary place, and at some level we have to trust components at a certain level, and that's a difficult position.
In completely unrelated news, Jerry will be marketing a new magic black box that detects this attack.
That is very true, yes. Stay tuned.
Now, this goes to a fundamental problem, which is that once, it's a little sort of abstract, but at the same time more definitive, is once an endpoint is owned by a bad guy, however they do it, how can you ever trust that endpoint again? And how can you trust any of the software utilities or detection or security utilities on that host that's been owned, especially if it's owned at a very, very core level, which goes back to the fundamental problem of detecting some sort of malicious behavior based on its activity on the wire. And by that I mean network activity, which may possibly be one way you could detect some sort of anomalous behavior based on this sort of esoteric attack, but still goes to the same fundamental problem, which is that once a box is owned, you can't trust any of the code on the box, which means you can't trust any of the software on the box, which means you can't trust any of the security software on the box. So how do you know that something bad's going on? You've got to go back to stuff it cannot manipulate, which is somehow its network behavior with our interconnected world today of attacks.
Yeah.
I'm just babbling at this point. Let's move on.
I picked up on that. So moving on, our next story comes from SecureList, and the title is Xdetic, the shady world of hacked servers for sale. So the story here is that apparently Kaspersky, I think that's Kaspersky, right? I hope it is. Found a marketplace, basically an underground marketplace where bad actors can buy and sell access to compromised servers. And in this particular marketplace, they found at one point earlier this year 70,000 different servers for sale, and most of them, I guess, costing as little as $6, including servers located in a European Union country government network. So that's that's a bargain, right? And
Cheaper than a colo.
it really is. And apparently this is a fairly sophisticated operation because this marketplace, it's not just a dumb, I want to buy and sell access to servers. They actually call some telemetry about the systems. Not only where it's at and whose networks it's on, but also what kind of software does it have. It's looking for a whole host of different kinds of software. A lot of it either point of sale software or tax software, or I guess unsurprisingly things like Proxifier, where they would be able to route traffic through. So basically using it as a proxy. So interesting. This kind of to me points out that it is useful. I think this is in the area of threat intelligence, right? This is one of the areas of threat intelligence that is useful, and I think there's a lot that potentially aren't useful for a lot of organizations. But knowing that you have a compromised server that's evaded all of your other defenses is a pretty handy thing to know.
Yeah, absolutely. And is there a service out there looking at these sites, and how do they know, this legitimate? And so these guys, and what I'm saying by that is these guys who run these sites have got to then do counterintelligence to make sure that there aren't services out there sniffing around to warn the folks that they've got the pop boxes on.
Yep, absolutely.
So that's a bit of arms race in and of itself, of these darknet sites trying to hide themselves from legitimate law enforcement or whatnot while still being available to shady operators.
Indeed. So there's,
and if you're on a blue team, it might be useful to know about these and sort of start checking for your own networks from time to time.
Yeah,
maybe not this particular site, but this sort of thing.
Good point. There are somebody did post pastebin links to all the IPs that were on the allegedly in this marketplace, so you can go and look that up on your own. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of them, and they're not in any order. So good luck.
I'd be curious how long a server stays popped on average, like how long they can maintain ownership of a box.
Well, they do talk a little bit about that. They said that in May of 2016 there were 70,624 servers from 416 unique sellers in 173 countries, but just before that, in March 2016, there were 55,000. So, it's there's really no good sense on what the churn rate is, but you can see that there's some growth.
Well, and that could be once they sold access to one person, they might take it out of the organization. But
that's true. And actually, this I thought it was pretty clever. This forum. Trying to find the exact quote in here. This forum apparently provided support, right? So let's see. Instead, they've created a marketplace where the network of affiliates can sell access to compromised servers. If truth be told, the people behind Xdetic have created what appears to be a quality service. The forum even includes live technical support tools, or special tools, to patch hacked servers to allow multiple RDP sessions, and profiling tools that upload information about the hacked servers into the Xdetic database.
Well, that's helpful.
I mean, they're yeah, they're running quite a service there.
Hmm.
So yeah. But I guess the other takeaway too is I think I've seen this, or lots of people have seen this coming for a while. There's a commoditization happening in the attack, the initial compromise versus the post compromise world, and so this is I think an example of that where people can specialize now in the criminal world. They can specialists in penetrations can go off and compile an army of compromised systems that they in turn sell for whatever purpose, and then if you happen to specialize in some area of criminal operations, you can go and find systems that you can buy, which have effectively the exact profile of what you're looking for. You don't have to go and run a big phishing campaign anymore because you're just buying access to systems you want.
Yeah, or a specific organization you want to go after.
Right.
Yeah, I need to go target, whatever, Bob's Moving Company. Let's go see if they've got any pop servers.
Yep. So moving on to our next story, which comes from the WashingtonPost.com, and the title is Guccifer 2.0 claims credit for DNC hack. So this happened last week while we were out. CrowdStrike actually went out with a big report about how Russian state-backed hackers had compromised the Democratic National Committee's network and stolen some documents related to Donald Trump. It's basically like competitive intelligence. And so CrowdStrike, did the yay us, we found it, us, it's super complicated attack run by nation state hackers in Russia. Aren't we awesome? And so in response to that, allegedly the hacker who stole the documents has released I guess a bit of a press release, and it says that he is calling himself Guccifer 2.0 because the Guccifer 1.0 is now in. I think he's awaiting trial or awaiting sentencing.
No, he pled guilty, I thought.
Okay.
I'll look it up while we're talking.
Maybe he's awaiting sentencing. He's awaiting something. Anyway, so Guccifer 2.0, Guccifer 1.0 that was the guy that stole all of the documents from George W. Bush and others. I think even Hillary Clinton too, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, so Guccifer 2.0 in an effort to prove that he is who he or she is, who he or she says she is, released, in fact, the documents that were alleged to have been stolen. So those are now out in the open, and also said, by the way, that it wasn't hard, and that he's an individual person not associated with Russia. And this particular story basically is saying that despite what Guccifer has come out and said, they are standing by their story and going down with the ship, that this, in fact, was Russian hackers.
And that this guy is just now launching a disinformation campaign to shift the goal or the attention away from Russia. And I saw in some other story somewhere, it might have been on Twitter, that often when these sorts of attribution issues come out, that the FBI will sometimes say, well, we're not sure we buy that or agree with that. Well, in this case, the FBI has been silent, so that means they must agree with CrowdStrike.
Totally.
So here's my thought. I don't know if CrowdStrike is correct or not in their attribution. I do know attribution is hard. And I also know that it's a lot sexier and a lot more marketing friendly to identify a nation state attacker than a lone kid sitting in his basement.
Yeah. Well, you never really expect them to come out and try to contest your attribution either.
So, if I had to bet, I have said many times in this program that things that are attributed to nation states are not as difficult or don't rise to a level of difficulty that require a nation state, in my opinion. There are some that certainly do. Stuxnet is a good example. But from what little we know about this, and just looking at the type of technology involved, there's no reason that this had to be a nation state. Now, do I have access to all the information CrowdStrike has? Of course not. So I'm just saying it is definitely conceivable, though, that CrowdStrike potentially overreached, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah. Well, I guess on the one hand, it's not hard to think that that foreign intelligence agencies would be poking around in the network of a political party in the U.S. That doesn't seem terribly surprising, and in fact, I think if you go and read some of the other reports, CrowdStrike's actually saying they found two separate and apparently independent Russian hacking teams.
So if we play that out, that would indicate that Russia would prefer Donald Trump in office over Hillary Clinton?
Well, actually, I have read that very thing, right? Because the allegation or the thinking is that whoever did this is obviously on the side of Donald Trump because, basically now all of the Democrats' bullets, I guess, are now out in the open, and they there's really nothing left for them to come out with later in the campaign, and so that's to his advantage. And oh, by the way, Donald Trump and Russia are kind of not buddy, but there's a mutual admiration society going on between him and Putin.
I don't know. It's a big stretch for me to think that this was. If it was Russian intelligence, don't you think it'd be more useful for them to sit on that information and use it to manipulate things than it is to just dump it?
Well, I think it was Dave Aitel in his he runs that Daily Dave mailing list. Which, by the way, if you're not a member of, it's worth subscribing to. I think they'll let anybody in. They let me in. I mean, that should sell you right there.
And you're known to chase people off Twitter.
That's very true. It's very true.
You are the cause of the llama drama 2 weeks ago, I think, mister.
I was. You're right.
Inadvertently.
Yeah. So anyway, I think it was Dave Aitel was pointing out that it's extraordinarily rare for a nation state who is known to have stolen some data to actually release it. So kind of like you said, they tend to sit on it. One of the only known instances is actually the whole North Korea Sony thing.
And you know how I feel about that.
Yeah, no, you're still a truther. I get it.
I am, absolutely. So I don't know. I am not sophisticated enough to know the machinations of Russian intelligence, but I'm just skeptical that this is a Russian intelligence-driven action.
Well, I think that there's not only the tactics and procedures, right, and the tools, which can be common and can be copied between an individual actor and a nation state. I suspect, just kind of reading the report, it sounded like CrowdStrike has kind of drawn a line, right? So they've been investigating other cases where it's been, I suppose, through some way known that the person or the group responsible was this particular Russian group, and so then they see the same tactics coming from the same sources using the same tools, and they're saying, well, that's probably the same people, which I suppose is not a bad guess. But again, like you said, we don't know all the details. I will say, and this has come up, I can't remember the other story that came up recently, but when you look for something, when you have experienced a data breach in your network, in the average network, and you go looking, you hire somebody to go looking, you're probably going to find a whole bunch of stuff you had no idea about. And then the question becomes, which things were associated with the attack that you've detected and which were completely coincidental and maybe indicative of other things that you had no idea was going on.
Yeah. It's like when you start baselining network traffic on your environment with some sort of network monitoring tool, you'll find all sorts of crazy stuff you had no idea about. In the first 6 months, you're chasing all sorts of crazy stuff that is actually just normal.
That's right. All right. So,
Like, oh my God, half my traffic is talking to some IP address in the UK. No, that's just a badly configured piece of software. Oh,
that never happens.
yeah.
Never ever. All right. So, moving on to our next story. And this one comes from Fox4KC.com. It's a Kansas City Fox News affiliate in Kansas City. And the title is Platte County Commissioners Give Treasurer 1 Week to Repay Funds Lost to Email Scam. Oh, wow. So the county treasurer, a guy named Rob Willard, apparently received an email. And this, I guess, it was in the same vein as what we've talked about in the past with the executive business email compromise scam. And the scam here was that this treasurer received what appeared to be an email from the county commissioner saying that he needed to pay $48,000 in state taxes, and it was like super urgent, and so which it's always super urgent in these scams. So
Isn't it?
Well, it has to be, right?
Right.
Got to get their money.
Yeah, and this, by the way, goes to a common tactic for social engineering, is that sense of urgency.
Right. So anyway, the commissioner transferred the funds from their bank account to Wells Fargo as instructed in the email. Then apparently a couple hours later, the treasurer was talking to the commissioners, joking about that $48,000 tax bill, and I'm guessing the treasurer had that really, really bad sinking feeling, like in the pit of your stomach, like what the hell have I done? And so they contacted the bank, and I guess they were able to get back about $28,000, and that left $20,000. So what's interesting here is that the county's basically gone to the treasurer saying, "Hey, you have a week to pony up that $20,000, however you're going to do it, or we're gonna, or you're going to have to pay it." And now that's where it gets a little weird, right? Because the commissioner, I guess all of the county commissioners must have an insurance bond, and so it sounds like if he doesn't pony up, it's not that he's going to pay for it out of his pocket. It's going to hit his insurance.
No, the way I read it is he can pony up, or they will then file a claim against his bond.
Yeah,
his surety bond.
Right.
The other thing that's interesting too is that this commissioner or this treasurer has fully admitted that he did not follow proper protocol in transferring the money. So, to be fair against, to this particular treasurer, though, this is a common tactic that's being used very effectively by the bad guys right now. So, I don't know. What do you think? Do you think this is reasonable for them to go after this particular treasurer?
Well, I mean, clearly it's because he effectively violated their. In effect, they actually say that the second to last paragraph. It's kind of interesting because they effectively say they've gone to the county prosecutor, and the subtext there is to explore whether the prosecutor wants to explore charges against this treasurer, which that's an interesting area of craziness too.
I mean, I don't want to be harsh about this, but he got scammed, and
yeah, exactly.
I mean, if you're going to start.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a tough one for me. I don't think this is right. I think these guys don't understand how common this is in the world right now, and that this is a well-honed attack. Now, sure, the guy might have violated their procedures, and that's bad, and perhaps he should be fired or censored or disciplined. But to force him to pay back the money, I think it's pretty harsh.
Well, especially since I suspect he was in in his own way, I think he was acting. I suspect he believed he was acting in good faith on behalf of his employer. I don't certainly doesn't seem like he was had any ill will. It seemed like he
Yeah,
was trying to do. And I mean, look, people make mistakes all the time.
it's true. You chose me as a co-host for
Well,
it.
that's very true. But we see public servants make far more serious mistakes all the time. I mean, how many times in recent times have we heard about a police officer killing the wrong person or someone on
I'm
accident?
not.
No,
You're on
no.
your own with this topic, buddy.
But point is, in the execution of their job duties,
No pun intended.
mistakes are, you know, mistakes made in the capacity of doing their normal jobs usually have avoided stuff like this. So it's just it
Well,
doesn't
granted,
mesh.
and that's why I think he has a surety bond.
True.
What I don't understand is, and maybe there's more to this story, right? Maybe they're going, look, this is why you have a surety bond, but we're giving you the option for us to not file against it. So maybe it's I don't know jack all about surety bonds. So
That could
I'm
be. You're right.
completely talking out of my ass here, but it could be like filing against your auto claim insurance where your rates are going to go up. So maybe there's a legitimate reason that they're giving him this option that has less to do with punitive reasons than it did giving him the choice of, hey, if you don't want this to go to your surety bond because this has some other consequence we don't know about, you got. Again, I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
reaching here.
Apparently, he also has to pay expenses incurred by the county on this episode, including attorney fees. So
Well, that's probably what they go to the surety bond for. Probably
yeah,
the same amount of money.
right. So anyway, um, point is, this is becoming a very well honed thing. It's impacting all reaches of society. I mean, this is a county government, and I'm not even sure, by the way, that this guy is a full time employee.
The other day, some kids down the street of me were having a lemonade stand. 80 cents scammed out of them, sent to a scammer.
Wow,
It's terrible.
that's something. So moving on
Nothing
to
sick.
to our last story, which comes from abc.net.au, and the title is "Software Legal Battle Could Put SA Patient Safety at Risk. Government outlines in court documents."
SA, by the way, being South Australian.
That's right.
So we're talking about down under.
So the South Australian government apparently is they have a network of 64 county hospitals and health centers that have been using this really old MS-DOS based patient care software system since sometime in the 90s, and I guess they've resisted all manner of attempts to get them to upgrade, and their license. The reason this is news is not because oh my God, they're running MS DOS. It's because apparently their license to use that particular software expired in I believe in March or May or just sometime earlier this year, and so now they're effectively being sued to discontinue use. And so now the government's basically saying, look, we have to keep using this because otherwise it's patients' lives are at risk, which is really weird.
This is a crazy story. So I actually went and did a bunch more research on this because it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So go through the story and then I'll kind of add in some of what I think I discovered. But
Sure. So the software's name is Chiron, which sounds ominous, right? But um, uh, they I guess the name of the software vendor is Working Systems, and
Chiron is from Greek mythology, by the way.
It sounded familiar.
Yes. Oh, and while we're on the topic of me interrupting you, I was going to look up Guccifer earlier.
Yeah.
He did plead guilty to 2 counts and
Okay.
is currently awaiting sentencing in
See, I knew it.
Virginia. Yep. So there you go.
I knew it. Anyhow, And he was extradited from somewhere, if I'm not
Yes,
mistaken.
he was in jail for 7 years in Romania, and then he was extradited from Romania to the U.S., where he was indicted on federal charges. And in May of this year, he pleaded guilty in federal court to 2 charges. This, according to the Wikipedia page, so take that for what it's worth.
Yeah. Oh, he's probably not editing it where he's at, I'm guessing. So anyway, the maker of the software, Working Systems, sent a demand that the state government, the South Australian state government, stop using their software because their license expired in March. Actually, it was March of 2015. I take that back. And the government is effectively going to fight them in court, saying that no, we're not. We have a humanitarian case here. We are not going to comply with that. We're going to keep using it because it's apparently too hard, too painful, and will, I guess, cause lots of people to die if they upgrade. Let's see. So, yeah, Working System said any risk related to patient safety was the government's fault, by the way, because it had failed to plan and refused to sign up for updated software 13 years ago in 2003 when this piece of software was replaced. So it's really this is a difficult story to wrap my head around from an IT perspective. I think if you look at this from a non-IT perspective, it probably makes a little more sense. But this is old stuff. I mean, it's DOS. It's a DOS program from the 90s. It's probably not even vulnerable to anything
Yeah, that's true.
because it's so old.
So I went and did some looking at it because I was very intrigued by this concept. I can certainly see the situation from a regulatory standpoint and from a best practices and policy standpoint why it's a bad idea to run out of support software. I get that. But it's common, at least in the US, to do that. And in general, the manufacturer doesn't care. They're like, well, you're not getting any patches. You're on your own. Piss off. But these guys are actually going to court. The vendor is forcing their customer to stop using this application. So I was curious about this, and I did some more investigation. At least what little time I had before the show, on using the wonderful services of Google. And what I found is actually the company that makes this is called Global Health. And what's interesting that I sort of got from this in their press releases is that they apparently have been trying to get these particular hospitals off this application for a while now, and yeah, going back all the way to 2003, but also in the last year or two. And it seems to me, reading between the lines, is that they are going to be forced to support this as long as they're running it. And so what they're trying to say is, you're our only customer running this. We sorry to lose you, but we need to shift our resources into other things.
Interesting.
So quoting from one of the press releases, the ability to finally retire Chiron through the minister's decision will enable the company to refocus our resources on accelerating the MasterCare cloud-based PS version that's currently in development for the global hospital market. So reading between the lines, it seems like they're forced to maintain support as long as the businesses are using it, at least perhaps maybe just the healthcare businesses, as opposed to just cutting them loose. So that may be why they're going to court over it.
So I wonder then, just given what you just described, if it's kind of the other way where, the vendor is kind of walking away saying, you're on your own, and the government is taking that company to court saying, nope, we're going to keep using it and you're going to keep supporting us. That's kind of what it sounds like.
That would make more sense, but that's not how any of the news is reading in this.
Right.
So if I go back and I look at here, I found another one here. Global Health and SA Health have since, so last year, Global Health announced that it was finally retiring Chiron, planning to decommission on March 31st this year. However, South Australian Health wanted to continue using beyond the cessation date. Global Health and SA Health have since been disputing terms, with Global Health threatening to take the SA Minister for Health to court, alleging infringement of copyright and breach of contract.
Interesting.
The spokesman for SA Health said the department is in ongoing dialogue with Global Health that remains confident in our ability to continue to use the Chiron software without infringing copyright. So perhaps it's a copyright law issue.
Yeah, maybe. It does say that in the story we were originally referencing, there's a paragraph in here. It says, according to court documents, the government argued without Chiron, hospital staff would not have access to critical information such as patient allergies to medication, and there was a potential for new patient data being lost or incorrectly recorded. And that was when Working Systems said that any risk to patient safety was the government's fault because it had not planned to migrate. So it's kind of a little. I mean, this particular article does make it sound like it's a copyright type case, but the other thing you read makes me wonder if that's the whole story, though.
There's probably some aspect of South Australian law we don't understand. But I think the bigger picture here is the concept of organizations running old software that works for them. And I don't think that we've reached a comfortable stasis in that sort of give and take of a customer and a vendor. So in many ways, it sounds like this is almost like a managed services contract that they're trying to get out of. But at the same time, if it weren't a managed services contract, do we want our vendors to have the right to tell us, sorry, you can no longer run that software that you bought and paid for? Or should say licensed for a period of time? It's an interesting sort of situation. In other words, if we buy into a piece of software, are we then forced to continually upgrade that software or decommission it via the vendor?
Well, I mean, but this is something that comes up a lot on the show, but usually in the context of the big ERP systems that people or the companies refuse to upgrade because it's that they spent a bunch of money configuring it on a particular version, and then as subsequent versions come out that fix security vulnerabilities, it is incredibly difficult to move forward. It's not just applying a patch and then rebooting the server. You often have to rewrite code, and I think this is a similar kind of a situation at some level because basically they've been told, look, that old piece of software is dead, and you need to move off to something new, and the health system here is basically saying, no, it's too risky, which kind of sounds very similar to what we've heard on, JBoss and PeopleSoft and Oracle and SAP and everything else. So I think it just goes back to that point that when we make an IT investment in some software, it is a long-term thing. It is, you have to go into it understanding. It's kind of like when you go buy a new car, right? When you go buy a car, we're all excited. I just recently bought several new cars. And
that's because you're a rock star.
Well, no, because I'm a parent of teenagers. But you don't think about the full life cycle of the car when you go in to buy it. It's new and exciting and shiny, and you want to take it to the car wash and keep it all clean. But that in 6 years you're going to be like, I can't wait to get rid of this piece of crap. And it's that sort of thing. You have to keep in perspective the whole life cycle of.
Agreed, but Ford isn't coming at you and suing you if you don't stop driving their car.
That's a good point. You're right.
So this is an interesting one, and I really feel like we're ignorant of South Australian law to truly understand this, but there seems like there's more to this.
Yeah, it is. It certainly is. So anyway, that is the show for this evening. Thank you for listening, and thanks for your patience while we were away for a week.
Yeah,
And,
thank you everybody for listening, and please hit us up on the Twitters. We enjoy talking with you all, and we're still amazed that you guys like to listen to our ramblings, but we're humbled and pleased that you do.
yeah. And you can find links to the stories we talked about today on our website, www.defensivesecurity.org. Look for episode 163. And you can follow the show on Twitter at DefensiveSec. You can follow Mr. Callett on Twitter at Lerg, that's Lerg, and me on Twitter at MaliciousLink. And with that, we'll talk again next week. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.